author, columnist, managing editor of LibertyNation.com, podcast host and conservative policy advocate.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special Illegal Immigration Edition, we are talking economics, budgets, employment and society, and how they're all impacted by the floods of people who enter the country illegally. It's going to be quite the show. Please remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. And you're on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Very fortunate to have with us on this immigration extravaganza, Liberty Nation's economics guru, Mr. Andrew Moran. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
For having me.
So, Andrew, it's obviously it's all systems go in terms of what's happening with immigration. It's an immigration drawdown, some might say. And what we've seen since Trump came back to office is I think it's a more than 90% reduction in border crossings. And then, of course, he's exempted from the privilege of visas, 12 countries with a potential of 36 on the way. And the deportations of those already in the country illegally appears to be continuing apace. And that has the folks over at Washington, D.C.'s most prominent news outlet in a bit of a fluster, because they say that immigration might be the lowest number, or in reverse, for the first time in 50 years. Give us the outline there, Andrew.
Yeah, you see the numbers, especially on the labor force side of things, that the number of immigrant workers or foreign-born workers, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has actually been on the decline this year, which has been notable, because for the last few years, you've seen such a divergence between the number of employed U.S.-born workers and the number of employed foreign-born workers. There's such a wide gap, and it's been a wide gap since around late 2019. So that's been a really significant sign in the U.S. labor market. And one thing when I was reading this article, what came to mind is that during the Biden years, people were saying, yeah, well, all this job gains is because of illegal immigrants. And if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics methodology, they include illegal immigrants in that foreign-born worker metric. So I think the timing is interesting, whereby you have the complete collapse of illegal immigrants crossing the border and all these deportations, and then you're all seeing a decline in the number of employed foreign-born workers. So it's not just legal immigrants who are getting jobs.
Yeah, it's one of the unspoken open secrets that, the job data, it accounts for that. Now, interestingly, there's a recent report out in the UK that illegal immigration accounts for a huge part of the. I want to term this correctly. It's several orders of billion, which in the UK is a lot of money. Not in America, of course, but it's a lot of money in the UK. A part of the black market economy, which obviously doesn't pay taxes, and yet it's still counted in the overall figures, especially when Britain was part of the European Union, because the remittances to the European Union, they counted, well, you've got this much of a black market economy as well. Well, we want our cut of that. It was very much a mafioso way forward. So with if the DC's most prominent paper is correct, and there's actually going to be a reverse in the immigration numbers, what does that mean economically?
Well, we should differentiate between legal and illegal immigration.
Well, let's start with illegal then.
Okay. So what I found funny, comical in this article was that they kept saying how, if we get rid of all these illegal immigrants, then wages are going to climb for all these different sectors. And
how terrible!
And they're going to have higher inflation, and it's to be all the higher costs that companies are going to be they're going to be borne onto them will be passed on to the customers. Now, so far, of course, we have yet to see the inflation from anything under this administration, whether from immigration or tariffs. Now, it could be a lag effect, but who knows? Now, on the legal side of it, that is more concerning because if you look at, let's say, the JOLTS report, that's the monthly survey conducted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows the number of job vacancies in the United States. This number has remained elevated. It's still above 7 million. It's higher than it was before the coronavirus pandemic. So the United States does have a labor shortage. And, the Chamber of Commerce regularly publishes a report identifying this problem. Now, the White House thinks it can reverse this because the number of working men is they're out of work. So therefore, they can fill this gap. But they've yet to do this over the last few years. I think the other side of the equation is more concerning, is the entitlement spending. Because if you have fewer workers in the United States, then of course there's going to be fewer people contributing to the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. As Liberty Nation has reported for years, this thing, it's running out of money. And if you have, let's say, 2 employed workers for every retiree, that's not a sustainable program. So you need legal immigrants to come in to help fill that gap and to sustain these programs. Now, that's who knows if that's going to happen or not. But if legal immigrants are really falling for what the media is saying, then yeah. So I don't know. Americans aren't having babies. They're not growing the populations. A lot of it is through immigration, which is, you could debate the merits of that, but the economics of it shows that you need immigration if you want to keep everything intact: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the other mandatory spending.
Yes, you pointed out in a recent article on the one big beautiful bill that's currently making its way through the Senate that and this is an old sore for Washington D.C., but it doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem. I guess until the spending gets under control, there's no real way to separate immigration from the overall economic debate, even though in any sensible, serious country, you shouldn't be reliant on foreign workers, I think. Otherwise, what kind of a country is that? What's your take on that?
Well,
That's just my opinion.
Sure. Fine. In a perfect world, okay, perhaps, but that doesn't take the fact away that you need legal immigration in today's world, because whether where you are, where I am, or the United States, the domestic population is not having children. There was a slight uptick in the United States. I think it was last year before, but overall, it's been just a steady decline. And the problem with that is that, the Americans are having babies, but politicians have made all these grandiose promises and have been Santa Claus for the last several decades. And now those bills are coming due. And so now you're going to have to immigrate people from India. You're going to have people come from, Australia or whatever the case to sustain everything.
Yeah. However, I find the reality of that situation is it's a very short-term solution, isn't it? Because as people move to, for example, the United States, they tend to adopt the habits and customs, and they also don't have the same amount of children they may have had in their home country, and they end up with the 2.4 or 1.8 or 1.9 that the rest of the population is having. And so it's like a Ponzi scheme almost.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
you're bringing in people because you need more people to pay into the Social Security as people get older. But then these people will also want to have the Social Security, the Medicaid, Medicare as they get older, and so you have to bring in more and more. It's the world's most depressing Ponzi scheme. But let's talk about some more bright sparks on the horizon, potentially for the middle and working classes. After this short break, don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Andrew back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we're continuing our economics talks with economics guru, Mr. Andrew Moran. Thanks for sticking around, Andrew. Now, we hinted at the big, beautiful bill and its progress. Now, at the time of recording, it's really only just come out of the Senate Finance Committee, so there's likely to be changes further within the Senate, and then, of course, it's got to go back to the House. I believe there's a self-imposed deadline of July 4th on that, and I know that Mike Johnson's pretty keen to, if necessary, keep people there during congressional recess if he has to get it passed. But I want to talk about the rhetoric and the narrative that surrounds the. I hate calling it the one big beautiful bill, because it might not be one, it might not be beautiful. It will certainly be big, and it's definitely a bill. But we'll see what it comes out like. Although I do appreciate why they're trying to get it all into one bill, because otherwise everything they want here is going to take years, and it's going to be into the next presidency, whoever that happens to be. So I get why they're doing it in one bill. But a lot of the critics of this are calling it, and specifically Bernie Sanders, because of course he is once again asking you to believe everything he says, and donate your money to him, of course. But they're saying that it's essentially tax cuts for the rich and nothing more, and that's the dominant narrative from Capitol Hill, on one side of Capitol Hill at least, and the mainstream or legacy media. But that's not quite right, is it, Andrew?
You're right. But I'll say one thing is that it's 1,000 pages, and I highly doubt anyone in Congress read it. I mean, even Marjorie Taylor Greene admitted that, I didn't know about that artificial intelligence provisions, this 1,000-page bill. But anyway, so yeah, absolutely. So it's as if there's only one line of text, and it's that it's only tax cuts for billionaires. But all the papers they're citing, so for example, there was a recent congressional hearing, House Ways and Means Committee hearing, and I think his name's Richard Neal. He's a congressman from Massachusetts. Yeah. And he was saying, this is only for tax cuts for billionaires. He started citing the Joint Committee on Taxation, and he started citing the Congressional Budget Office. But if you read those papers, it says, yes, there's tax cuts for billionaires, but the average tax rate for most Americans is actually going down under the proposed law.
Yeah.
BBB. So it's not just, everyone is going to eat crumbs and all the rich are going to have pay 0% tax.
Who was the crumb? That was Nancy Pelosi, wasn't it?
Yes.
Talking about the original 2017.
That's what's funny about it.
Loves that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years later, this is exactly right.
Yeah. It's almost as if they were given a report. It will be almost 10 years ago now. And they said, right, this is what you're sticking to, and just keep saying it until everybody believes it. Yes, so there's what it shows, I believe, according to, you had a great article on this called "Is the One Big Beautiful Bill for Billionaires" that came out this week, and you really dove into the very numbers that the critics are citing, and what is it? Because they're citing research, but the research itself doesn't say what they say it says. So are they just mistaken? Are they purposely obfuscating? Are they trying to get away with the damn lies statistics thing and hope that enough obfuscation on the numbers could be brushed over? And most importantly, I think the question has to be, Andrew, is why would those who oppose the bill, now, sure, there could be plenty of things to oppose, as you mentioned, Marjorie Taylor Greene and the AI embargo on AI regulation. But regarding the tax cuts, for example, tax on tips and overtime, why is nobody getting behind that? I thought that was a fairly... why are they trying to kill that? Because I thought that would be fair to popular for everybody, right?
Well, it was Washington politics, of course. I mean, of course, it's automatically that the one side that was going to oppose this bill, and that's how they have to market it. So they have to defend their opposition by claiming that is only for the ultra wealthy, when of course that's not the case. But that you're absolutely right. So not even if you take away the average tax rate declines across the board, except for the lowest number, which is $15,000 to $30,000. Sure. Everyone's getting tax cuts. But you look at the no tax on tips. Who does it benefit? The working class. No tax on overtime. Who does it benefit? The working class. The $1,000 baby bonus, which of course I have reservations about, but overall, who does it benefit? The low and middle income households. So you have all these goodies here that benefit the typical person. So there was another one. I think it was Senator Sanders who was saying, but what you have the 285 billion tax breaks for the 2/10 of the top 1%. Okay, fine, that may be case, but also what about the person who's making $80,000 to $100,000 a year, but their tax rate's going down from 15.4 to 13.5%? I think it's also worth pointing out too is that we've had this conversation I think a couple of years ago, and we argued that one of the worst consequences of inflation is that you're artificially placed into a higher tax bracket because, yes, you're earning more, but why you're earning more? To keep up with inflation. When you keep up with inflation, your tax rate goes up, so therefore the gains are negligible. So this is one of the side effects of inflation. So therefore, this OBBB is perhaps somewhat correcting that the inflation crisis of the last few years.
Yes, it's see, I believe my memory is correct. I'm not just engaged in like a golden age thinking issue here, but the under Trump's first term, the economy was rather good. There were some dark spots naturally because there always are, but for the working middle classes, it was a pretty good economy. And then there were 4 years of let's be clear on what it is. It was a pretty terrible economy overall, especially with the inflation. And now we're at Trumponomics 2.0, and it's really just that. Am I correct in this? Is it really just trying to replicate the exact same conditions? I mean, essentially taking the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and then making that permanent, and then putting a couple of extras on top, or is there something more substantial at play?
No, I think you're right. I think the OBB replicates somewhat of the TCGA. I think this is just one aspect of Trumponomics 2.0. Of course, the mother lode is the whole tariff situation and rebalancing global trade and turning the United States into a manufacturing prowess and turning everyone else into consumers. I think it's just only one flank of Trumponomics 2.0.
You mentioned tariffs there, Andrew, and another great article that you wrote for LibertyNation.com was looking for the elusive inflationary impact or costs on consumers of Trump's attempt to, I guess, rejig the entire global economy through mean tweets, which I found quite entertaining. But it's turned out to be elusive, hasn't it? The data that everybody warned about.
Yeah, when Trump announced his April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs, economists were apoplectic and they said, we're going to have, inflation to spiral out of control. But so far, all the leading inflation reports show that inflation is yet to rear its ugly head. You have inflation slightly above 2%. You have the producer price index, which is a measure of the prices paid for goods and services by business, and it can serve as a precursor to future consumer inflation. That's been very low. It actually fell. I think it was in April. The import and price inflation, import and export prices, that's been minimal. Even if you go through Trueflation, it's a popular private running estimate of inflation, and it uses millions of data points, and it's been below 2%. Now, I will note that tariffs operate on a lag. So who knows? Maybe the inflation will show up later in the year when all the inventory, all the pre-April 2nd inventory is exhausted and they have to start importing again. So maybe that's when inflation starts appearing. But for now, prices aren't accelerating. And I think that's perturbing a lot of Trump's critics because they were betting that tariffs will raise inflation and become ugly as Bidenomics. But I will say one thing though. You look at the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index, and you had that 1 year inflation outlook going as high as 8%. But that thing is just crazy now because a lot of the American people are realizing, okay, so tariffs will not be that bad, trade policy will not be that bad. So they've actually trimmed their inflation expectations, which I think that's been the most hilarious part of this expectation, because you look at that UMich and you saw just a spike. People thought the inflation could go to 10%.
Yeah, they thought it'd be the same as under Joe Biden. That wasn't what they voted for. Andrew Moran, thanks ever so much for being with us. Really do appreciate it.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We're continuing our talk on immigration, this time with Liberty Nation's enterprise reporter, Mr. Joe Schaefer.
Very enterprising Joe Schaefer. Hi, Mark.
The enterprising and entertaining Joe Schaefer. Thanks for being on, Joe. Really appreciate it. So we've been talking earlier in the show, we're talking with Andrew Moran about the economic impacts of, firstly, migration, illegal migration, and then the end of illegal migration, what economic impacts that having. But with you, Joe, I want to kind of take this a little bit broader and talk about societal impacts, impacts on the workforce, and the political ramifications of that. So we've seen a bit of a furore this last week over discussion about going after employers who employ illegal migrants. What's your take on that?
Well, the New York Times had an article, I believe it was a few days earlier before Trump spoke, in which he said they quoted, top sources in the administration saying the administration was going to pivot away from going after farm and hotel illegal alien workers because they had been receiving blowback from the employers. And it's the New York Times. You can never know if they're actually reporting the truth. They've got
Sure.
such axe to wield. But Trump actually came out and made a public statement authenticating the story, saying that we have a lot of good people in the farm and hotel industry that want to lose their good workers. And, he basically said that they're going to pivot away from this. And, it's not just anecdotal, although I can tell you my friends who support Trump are angry about this. Trump supporters are going to be angry about this. They did not elect him just to deport so-called criminal illegal aliens, which is really a drop in the ocean. They did not just elect him to deport illegal aliens. They elected him to go after the employers of illegal aliens, to change this decades-long construct that not only has helped flood the country with illegals, but has hurt the wage power of the American worker. So, they want real systemic change, and you can't get real systemic change on immigration without going after the employers.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because there was a report into the Brexit, the potential impacts of Brexit before the vote took place, and I believe it was a chap called Charlie Rose who was doing the report, and he had this as a negative. He said wages would rise because we'd have less immigration come in, and he was selling this as, well, this is a bad thing because wages would rise for the average Briton, and he was ripped for that, and still does get ripped for it today. For saying that it's a bad thing that wages would rise for the average Briton. But I guess the point that he was making was that it's the businesses that have to pay this extra rate to get workers. So back to what the New York Times said, and that Donald Trump, he seemed to confirm, but I'd push back a little bit on that. He says we're pivoting away or towards. And I think Tom Homan, the border czar, cleaned this up fairly well. Although I'm not sure. I guess there's still a lot of trepidation. Like, have we been sold a pup, as it were? A lot of his supporters might be saying. But he said that we're going after, yes, the employers. We're going after the people who work in those industries. But he seemed to be saying that the priority is the ones that you describe as a drop in the bucket, the violent illegal alien criminals. And I wonder, Joe, maybe I'll play a bit of devil's advocate here, is in terms of damage to the country, society, and the individuals, don't you think that prioritizing those who have committed violent crimes in the country should be the priority, right? Shouldn't that be, wouldn't that limit the greater damage first?
Priority implies that we're going to take care of them first, and then we're going to take care of the rest of the problem. Now, what Trump said suggested to me that he's not so interested in taking care of the rest of the problem, and so I'm not going to let him off the hook here. His words are very alarming. Yet Tom Homan said they're still going to go after employers. So it's still up in the air, I guess. But what Donald Trump said, President Donald Trump said, is we have good people on these farms, these industrial scale farms, who have these good workers. Well, it's not a good situation on these big farms. It's an ugly, ugly, scandalous situation. I've written about it several times. We've talked about it on Liberty Nation before. Abuses to these illegal alien workers are horrific, including rape, death on the job, abuse of children. There was just just a case, a civil lawsuit in Michigan. I wrote about it on June 1st before the outcome. The outcome's now been reached. A jury found against a hiring service, I guess it is, for illegal aliens that come from Guatemala via the H-2A visas, the pipeline into America. The jury awarded them $500,000 in punitive damages for abusing their illegal alien workforce. And these people were working 100-hour weeks, 20-hour work days, and they were only being paid 60 out of the 100 hours. It came out to about $8 an hour. So, and according to the workers, they said that they were threatened by they were being charged $2,500 or so to go through that pipeline, the H-2A pipeline. This is, of course, a grotesque abuse of the system, charging them $2,500, which is not in effect, is indentured servitude. Okay, what, you have to work off your $2,500 fee to the company? Is this like the factory store days? It is. So they use that threat against their cheap worker force while they're underpaying them. So you can't tell me it's a situation where we value our good workers and, oh, gee, Americans just won't do this job. This is malevolent attempt. This is malevolent intent on the employer's part. And so for when President Trump says good people, good workers, it's not true. We all know it's not true. If you recall, the subhead I had on it was quoting that Leonard Cohen song. Everybody knows the dice is loaded. Everybody rolls with their fingers crossed. What is those? It's a great song, by the way.
It is a great song.
What does that line mean? Everybody knows, everybody rolls with their fingers crossed. We all know it's a rotten system, but they want us to feel like, hey, we could get lucky anyway. Hey, it can work out for us. When you have societal outcomes that aren't working anymore. And this is what you're especially seeing in England, which is on the point of civil war because their societal outcomes aren't working. Societal outcomes are not working for the American people on a basic level. And if we want to go with farms, look at the obesity crisis, look at the autoimmune crisis. The output of the actual product that these illegal alien farm workers are producing is corroded, cheap, unhealthy food. So maybe this whole model needs to be, I would say, blown up, but at least re-examined. And this model absolutely feeds on exploitative cheap labor imported from Central America.
Yes, the link between illegal alien employment and human trafficking. I mean, it's clear. It's a very, very clear pipeline, and it's not something that's just based in the United States, either from South to North America, but worldwide. People abusing and the visa systems that are in place through disreputable companies that hire for, and the care industry is a prime example of that in the United Kingdom, hiring carers from overseas because they've got the right to bring in as many carers as they like under the visa proposals, and really they're just treated appallingly. But of course we're all supposed to applaud that. But look at all these people coming into care for our elderly population, and it's a tragedy on so many levels. We're going to be back with Joe Schaefer after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back with Mark Angelides and Joe Schaefer on Liberty Nation Radio. We're continuing our talk on immigration, illegal immigration, or otherwise. Now, Joe, we've talked about the exploitative nature of illegal migrants being employed within the United States workforce. But there's also a societal detriment, I think, to, and a lot of people on the left would disagree with this, but there's a societal detriment to having a lot of illegal immigration within the cities, towns, and communities. And we do hear all the time, these people are part of our community, these people are part of our town, our district. And I don't think it's actually entirely true. And I quote none other than and this is off the top of my head, so please do forgive me if I get the year wrong, a 2007 article in the New York Times that actually looked at, is diversity the strength. And what they found was, and this was by a proponent of one of the major proponents of diversity, and increased immigration. And what they found was that communities with more diversity were less trusting of each other, even if it was diversity among people who are from the same place as them, less trusting of each other. They volunteered less, they engaged civically less, and were generally less hopeful about life. Joe, your thoughts?
Well, that's a very philosophical question, and I think it's a very good philosophical question, but I'll give you my philosophical answer, and it ties back to what we were talking about with the so-called good employers on the industrial farms. And I believe this is all representative of an oligarchy. When people have learned a lot, Americans have learned a lot about oligarchy thanks to the Biden administration.
If I might just interrupt, a recent survey, I believe it was Napolitan News survey, that there's a vast swath of Americans don't actually know what the word oligarchy means. And I'm presuming they're the ones that are attending the Bernie and AOC oligarchy tours. Please carry on.
No, it's true, but I think that Joe Biden, really, they know the word at all. His administration illustrated it in such a way that Americans understand now. It is a bunch of elites who want a society that works best for them, and they do not care for the middle class. They see the middle class as an impediment. And what we are seeing is more elites, more wealthy people, and a lot more poor people, and nothing in between. And that is the historical recipe for violent revolution. That's how you get a French Revolution in 1789. That's how you get a Russian Revolution in 1917. But, temporarily, it works great for these people. So, let's go back to that philosophy of urbanism. Illegal aliens it works in several different ways. The big government that's in the cities, they need people to justify their budgets, to justify all that. So people have fled the cities because the jobs aren't there anymore. So they're importing illegal aliens for crazy, from half a world away into towns like Utica, New York, which were once great manufacturing towns, turned into ghost towns, and now are just filled with these illegal aliens. They're taking over the Catholic churches, the Protestant churches from the immigrants of over 100 years ago are now turning into mosques in Utica. And it's this profound change. It's not the America we knew, and it is divisive. There is division. But my theory is these entitled oligarchs, they want division. They don't want a homogeneity, a common united society, because that will question them, that will threaten them. The best form of citizen in a republic is a middle class landowner. That's the best kind of person who will defend a republic. The best kind of person for an urbanite consumerist democracy, which is their favorite word. It's not a mistake that they keep using that word democracy, is someone who owns no land, owns nothing, lives in a tiny apartment, barely gets by, has no real power, even though they're very emotional, get worked up about things, has no real power because there's no community, there's nothing tying them together, never really represents a threat to these people in the upper crust who just keep making money. So to me, it's the big industrial farmers, it's the big corporations, it's the progressive politicians. That's what I say when I use the term oligarchy. And illegal aliens, whether they're in business or big government or just leftist progressive radicals, they all love illegal aliens because it all furthers that purpose for them.
So I think it's really interesting what you say about middle class landowners, because let's be clear, it does work. It's in the shape of a pyramid, right? There are more less wealthy people at the bottom, more wealthier people at the top, and then there's this huge chunk in the middle, and that's about social mobility, right? And I think that's one of the key things of a successful society, is that you can move from the working class to the middle class, and as you say, become a landowner yourself, which is, it really gives you a stake in the game, right? In a way that even having children doesn't, because you can always take your children somewhere else, but once you have once you have land yourself and you have that level of comfort that you're not constantly moving around, that's how you build community. It's a group of people who have decided to stay in one place and they're tied to that land. And without that, you don't have, I mean, sure, you can say, and it's very much the identitarian politics aspect of it. You can say, you're part of a group, you're part of this ethnic group, you're part of this sexuality group, you're part of this, that, or the other. Insert whatever adjective you want in there. But it's people caring about the area that they're in because they are wedded to that area, and that goes beyond race or sexuality or even in many cases religion. If you are tied to a piece of land and you have an interest in everybody else keeping their piece of land as beautiful as you want to keep yours, and that's what forms great community. But if you're just bringing in people who have no ties to the land and they're consuming resources from that land and then can move somewhere else, I think that's the problem, right? You end up with a situation where nobody has a tie to the land. And as you say, they own nothing. I mean, this is when you started saying that they own nothing, they rent.
Who does that?
Yeah, that's the WEF old idea, wasn't it? From about 3 or 4 years ago. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I don't know if that was a suggestion or a warning. But sorry, to wrap this back up again, Joe. So what's happening to the middle classes in America now?
Well, it's really what we've discussed. They're losing agency, they're losing power, their numbers are dwindling. You're seeing the numbers of have-nots growing, which means that you're going to see dissatisfaction growing. And, when they say that when the progressive left says that Trump is like the destroyer of, again, their word democracy, Trump is the sane solution to this problem. If we don't solve this problem, it's going to be a violent solution with violence from left or right. Again, when you have a majority of people feeling that they are being oppressed by the system that they are living under, that system is not going to survive. So when you look at this, I just feel it strongly that they're trying to hold on to something that is not sustainable. And when we let's get back to the hiring illegal aliens as cheap labor is not sustainable for all the reasons we just discussed. It's going to destroy the middle class. It's going to lead to all this dissatisfaction. It's going to destroy community harmony. It's going to lead to more crime. All these things lead to a less stable system, which is going to topple the very people who are exploiting these illegal aliens in the temporary pursuit of as much money as possible. If these people had any vision, any foresight whatsoever, they would realize that this is going to redound onto our heads at the end. And so this has to be solved. This problem, we can't keep kicking this down the road for another decade. And so just deporting a bunch of MS-13 members is not going to solve this problem. If you're abusing workers like this, it's not going to be sustainable. It's going to topple and you're going to be toppled. So, let's change this country harmoniously or we're in trouble. It's going to be a lot worse.
Joe Schaefer, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to take a moment to thank our guests today, Andrew Moran and Joe Schaefer. Thanks for taking the time to come in and join us here. And of course, I'd like to thank you, the listeners at home, who tune in each and every week to join us on this journey. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse campaigns, candidates, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.